Why is it that some people get so many things done even though they've tried them before? And one of the reasons is because they have a Shoshin mindset, which means, and it stands for lifelong learning. Now, every business is constantly being upgraded. We upgrade our systems, we upgrade our processes, but it's also so important to upgrade our thinking. In our businesses, it's important that the people that work within it really have this open mindset. And when you look at this traditional word, which comes from the Japanese culture, Shoshin means truly with an open heart and with an open mind. Now, I haven't always had the Shoshin mentality, and there are still times that I find myself not having a Shoshin mentality. In fact, when I worked out the first concept, that's the person that introduced me this particular concept to me, was a gentleman by the name of Nick Bloor. I went in to get some training done on how to be a mentor in a particular organization. At this point, I'd already been coaching and mentoring for almost 20 years. And I was like, why do I have to go to this particular training? Why can't I just rock up and be able to do and be assigned to the particular coachee that's going to be given to me, and I could then get on with the piece of work? And then Nick introduces this particular concept to me. Well, I laughed out pretty loudly, I tell you, because here was I learning a word when I absolutely had no Shoshin mentality. I went into it with a closed mind. And how often do we experience that as business leaders and owners? People say things like, I've already tried that before. Why would we bother? Or even if they don't say anything, their attitude, their body language, and their behaviors that come out at the end of it are basically saying, I don't want to go in and I don't want to actually try that. So sho in the Japanese word means open, and shin stands for open heart and open mind. And in this podcast, which comes from chapter 5 of my book, Getting Your People to Step Up, it really is about saying, what are some of the things that we can do as business leaders and owners so that we can create and foster an environment where our people would want to do that? And some people say, well, what type of people do happen to have, the Shoshin mentality? Now, whether you love him, dislike him, hate him, Elon Musk is somebody that would absolutely come across as somebody that's got a Shoshin mentality. I'm not going to talk about other characteristics because there's some of those characteristics that I'm not a fan of and others that are amazing. When you look at the fact that he's been a visionary entrepreneur and he's founded multiple businesses and looked at things perhaps that other humans have even just dreamt a little bit about, but he's worked out how to create that, whether it's SpaceX, Tesla, colonization of Mars, all these different things that he's come up with, he at some point has had that Shoshin mentality and has been able to look at, whether it's technology barriers, whether it's skepticism, whether it's competitors, whether it's media, whether it's production issues, even the cost of what needs to happen, he's been able to come up with some different ways of thinking. And at times he's been successful and at times he's been really unsuccessful. Some of the other leaders and business entrepreneurs that I've seen, I look at somebody like Tony Robbins, who's a life coach and author. He talks about the fact that the path to success is to take massive determined action. We look at people like Simon Sinek, which is known for his purpose-driven work on leadership and why. He talks about people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. When you look at, even Steve Jobs, who for me is somebody that's so much of a Shoshin mindset, he just questioned the status quo. Why couldn't computers make and why couldn't a device make music, and why could it not be portable? So there are so many hundreds of examples of some people that have really had that Shoshin mentality, and you don't need to be somebody that's running a mega billion-dollar business to be able to do that. We can do this in our small to medium-sized businesses as well. There is an amazing woman called Kate Save. She runs a business called Be Food Food, and she talks about the fact that their value is really to embrace and grow, because small businesses need to constantly be able to do that as well. There's a lady called Fiona Anshaw who runs a business called Wholesome Bellies, and she says when you find great people, what you want to do is continue to grow and develop them so that they actually stay in the business, which is such an important part of your retention strategy as well. And there is a gentleman called Angus Nichol. He runs Black Market Coffee with his wife Jess. And he talks about the fact that it's so important to implement systems when things are really challenging so that you can make some of that difference in terms of what you need to do. So some of the actions that we need to do as business leaders and owners, the first thing is we want to be able to create a culture of Shoshin. Well, what does it actually look at? Well, when you have a culture of Shoshin, an open mind and an open heart, you're actually creating an environment where people actually feel free to ask, why would we do that? Or what if we did this? So they've actually got, they feel like it's psychologically safe for them to be able to ask these questions. You also want to create an environment where people are mindful and they're sharing things in the present moment that allows for more Shoshin thinking. And you can do a bunch of strategies in there that I've talked about in other podcasts as well. We also want to have the flexibility, even though we can see the answer as business leaders and owners, we want to have the flexibility of allowing other people to come up with some of those ideas in sometimes their time frames as well. We want to set a positive example of what Shoshin is like, often being really open to learning and coming up with that. And one of the things I find is so important with Shoshin is to practice humility. Just be humble that other people around you, your team, can come up with better ideas. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've run different businesses and my team's actually come up with a better idea for me to do that better. In fact, that conversation happened earlier today when I was speaking to one of my team members in terms of putting a particular event together, and she was telling me about some of the things that we can do in LinkedIn that I wasn't aware of. One of the beautiful books I've read about Shoshin and having a beginner's mindset is called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Shiniru Suzuki. And it talks about the principles of Zen Buddhism, but it also then talks about how to have Shoshin in your business if you want to be able to have a look at that. The second thing I want to talk about in this particular podcast is AI. Now, AI is starting to infiltrate all parts of our life. It always has, but now we're a lot more aware of it. And when it comes to things like AI, I remember early in 2018, Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Alphabet, which is Google's parent company, talked about the fact that AI was going to be one of the most important things that humanity had ever worked on. In fact, it's going to be as profound as electricity or fire. And I remember people going, yeah, really? A few years later, we're now starting to see the fact that how much AI is going to underscore what we do in our society and what we do in our business. Now, we've got to really come up with AI with a beginner's mindset. Some people that have been in that space for a long time can see that, others cannot. So, for example, one of the small actions that I'm taking in my life is I try and spend about 15 minutes minimum on AI. I would just do some searches, whether it's just simple things as ChatGPT or having the paid version, looking at some of the things that I can do. And some of the things that's going to significantly shift are professions like healthcare and counselling and education, and where we actually need to have a lot of human connection, that will still exist. But anything that AI can do, or we can do that by outsourcing it, that's going to help us change some of the patterns and the thinking and how we actually engage AI. So when I talk about AI in my book, I talk about the fact that we cannot just go, yes, it's another thing that'll go. It's not going to go away. How can we actually get our people trained in utilizing AI better? I was speaking to a client the other day who do a lot of grants and submissions. And one of the things that they were saying is, well, we just don't know what the balance is between having people that have done grant submissions for us in the past versus the fact that we now want to be able to use AI for a lot of that. Well, imagine if the person could use AI prompts to actually create a better grant submission. So could we, with the use of AI, become better at that grant submission by having a human as well as AI collaborate to be able to work on that together? Which I believe in a lot of spaces, unless you're in an industry that can completely be overtaken by AI, that's the way that it will go. There's a lot of things that will be done by AI, and that human contact and being able to put the human part of that together is going to become really, really important. The last and the third point I really want to talk about, Shoshin mindset, is having an intergenerational workforce. This is the first time in history that we've got 5 generations working in the workforce at the same time. So we've got veterans coming back part-time, we've got baby boomers, we've got Generation X, we've got millennials, we've now got Gen Z starting to come in. So imagine for a business leader and owner, how are we going to communicate with these different people? How are we going to include what we do, and people that have been born up to 1945 coming back in, because so many places and cities and countries are short of talent, compared to people that have been, born as late as 2012, right? Which fits into my two teenage categories. I've got two Gen Zs in there. And so how can we have these people with very different needs? How do we create flexible work arrangements? How do we have personalized recognition, because each of them want that differently? How do we even create incentive and bonus programs, considering that each of them will actually want to do that differently? I don't have the clear answer for you. What I do know is that the people and the managers and the leaders and entrepreneurs that are going to have these people working for them, we need to have better strategies. Alvin Toffler is a renowned futurist, and he once said that the illiterate of the 21st century is not the ones that cannot read and write, but it'll be the ones that cannot learn and unlearn and relearn. And so the whole part of relearn is we need to have that Shoshin mentality, not saying that we can't learn and we haven't learned, but how do we unlearn? The first part is, how do we just stop and go, that's maybe not the only way to do things? And how do we actually relearn in terms of the different generations that are in there? And I believe that under intergenerational workforces, there's a number of things that we can look at. How do we actually promote some cross-generational learning? So we could encourage people from different generations, for example, work together and share their knowledges and expertise. We could create groups and subgroups where younger generations can learn from some of the older generations and vice versa. I know certain CEOs that are now hiring young millennials to be their coach so they can actually keep up with AI in a number of industries, for example. That is having a Shoshin mindset. So having an environment of mutual respect where people are willing to learn from each other is one really great way of doing that. The other is to having, offering, for example, for your training and development, offering the flexibility in that, providing a range of programs. So, for example, there could be some face-to-face training, there could be online training, there could be, programs developed with AI. So just looking at different ways that you can keep your workforce operating and really operating at that higher level. And also giving feedback. Feedback is not very easy to give through anything AI. So creating a feedback system where you give people input into what they're doing really well, what could they improve. One of the other chapters, I spent the whole chapter talking about feedback and having, importance of giving and receiving feedback. And that is so important to harness a particular culture. So there's so many things that can be done around being able to create that. I also wanted to talk about Netflix. Netflix is a brand that we're all aware of, and Netflix did something amazing. And how they actually used AI. So, for example, to get their market leadership happening and maintaining their customer service, one thing that Netflix did was it used AI algorithms to work out what, for example, the viewers' habits were, what their preferences were, what their behaviors were. And that AI system continually adapts for its recommendations. It gives users with a personalized content selection, and that approach has now increased their user engagement. It's, engaged their retention. There's a fair bit of work coming out that a lot of other Netflix competitors are going to be coming on board. They're going to get faster and faster. Anybody using AI is going to get faster and faster at being able to do that as well. So as you reflect on this particular part, I want to ask you some questions. The first is, do you assess in the hiring process, how do you assess and do you assess people that have got a Shoshin mindset? How open they are to learning, because that part is going to become more and more and more important. Are they willing to, as Alvin Toffler said, are they willing to unlearn so that they can relearn in terms of what they do? What are some of the things that you're doing as a business leader and owner to encourage that Shoshin mentality? How do you do it? Are you leading it? Can you think of example situations where we could really encourage that in the business? How are you and your team managing and catering to the different generations that exist in your business? What other initiatives or training programs do you have? What flexibility and range do you provide that? What are some of the learning opportunities that people have in coming up with that? Does your culture allow for some of the mistakes to happen as part of your culture, or are people reprimanded and really taken down for having a go at some of the other things? And how do you encourage lifelong learning? How do you encourage feedback from some of your people? And creating incentives that are really there for lifelong learning is going to be great, because we need people to constantly be doing programs and courses to keep up with what is coming at us that we actually haven't seen before. So as you think about Shoshin mindset, always as a business leader and owner, think about yourself. Have you got it? What are some of the things you can do? How do I integrate with that with my people? How do that integrate that with the culture in my business? And obviously permeates into other parts of it. As I said, I've learned Shoshin the hard way. I hope that you got one or two good takeaways out of that. Keep learning and growing. Keep an open heart and an open mind. And thanks for tuning in. I'm Shivani Gupta, and you've been listening to the Grow Your Business podcast. I hope you got one idea that you can think about or perhaps even implement straight away in your business. Thank you for listening. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn under Ask Shivani. Remember, I call it Ask Shivani, so please send me your questions that I can address in this podcast for you. And I would also so appreciate if you went to the Apple Podcast to rate and review this podcast.